G'day, mate. This is the Australian vlog. I spent the month of December in Australia with my brother James, and we travelled up along the east coast. So the trip started with a 7-hour flight from Singapore to Sydney. I got to the airport, bought myself a sim, and then met up with James and took a train to the city centre. We walked to our accommodation, dropped our bags off, and then headed back out to get some lunch. And I'd heard in Australia that the meat pies were good and they didn't disappoint.
First impressions of Sydney? A bit like England. But nice weather and it's clean and there's no yobs apart from us. Yeah, very nice.
After walking through Sydney, we checked out the Sydney Opera House. And there were a lot of these birds around, which are Australian white ibis. But in Australia, everyone calls them a bin chicken. And after checking out the Opera House, we took a walk through the Botanical Gardens. And for dinner, we went to a pizza shop which was connected to our hostel. For our first full day in Sydney, we rented some speedy e-bikes and biked along to Bondi Beach. Bondi Beach was a huge beach, and it was quite a hot day, so it made for a good beach day, and even all around the beach had nice scenery. We stopped for some fish and chips for lunch. Then we headed out on the coastal walk that runs between Bondi Beach to Coogee Beach. Coogee Beach was another lovely beach. When we got back for dinner, we made some stir fry, but I made a big mistake and didn't put enough sun cream on my back that day. The next day we walked along to Mrs. Macquarie's chair, which was built in 1810 by convicts for the governor's wife, and it was a great spot for another view of the Sydney Opera House. Then we walked back along through the Botanical Gardens, through the city centre, and I finished off walking through Hyde Park. We got back to the hostel and made some tacos for dinner, and finished off the day with a quiz night.
The largest urban centre in the world.
The next day we had a chill morning at the park next to our hostel. It was a hot day, and on the afternoon we'd be switching hostels, so we took it easy. And after the park we had some lunch.
Pretty chill day. Just watched a bit of the Ashes and we're heading to another hostel in Sydney to spend another 2 nights here.
The next day we took a ferry to get to Manly Beach, and here we decided to invest in some bigger beach towels. And we saw a Christmas band in their Hawaiian t-shirts. We left Manly by taking the ferry back to Sydney Harbour, and then we walked back to our hostel. Next day, some more scrambled eggs for lunch.
So we just checked into a room at a different hostel, but we've got a private room this time. And today we've also booked our trip up the East Coast for 21 days.
Then on the evening we went out to play some pool, and on our walk back we saw a common bush-tailed possum. I finished off the day with a WhatsApp catch-up with the family. The next day started off strong with 11 Weetabix. And on the afternoon we went out to do some bouldering. For our last day in Sydney we headed back out, took a bus to Bondi Beach again. After the beach we made a quick stir-fry dinner and yogurt for dessert. We then walked with our bags to the bus station, and we got on a bus, and we were getting the bus for 13 hours, so we'd be sleeping on it to get to Byron Bay. So 13 hours and not much sleep later we got to Byron Bay, checked into our hostel and got ourselves some pizza, and on the afternoon we decided to walk to a lighthouse. It was mostly a walk on the beach, but then we saw some lizards, and some Australian bush turkeys, and then our first wallaby, as well as also some turtles, which you can't actually see in this picture, but we did see them. Then the furthest east point in Australia, and the lighthouse. The next day in Byron Bay, we went to a farmer's market on the morning. James found some eggs, which he was quite keen for, but we went for some fritters instead. After this, we went to do some kayaking to see dolphins, and we went in for a swim, but getting out of the kayak was a lot easier than getting back into it in the water. And James would say it's my fault. I think it's probably his fault, but we fell in. But we got back in, and James did most of the kayaking on the way back. And on the afternoon, we had a go at some surfing.
No, neither of us could get up on the board properly.
So after struggling to surf, we went out to get some dinner and went out to a piano bar in the evening. Next day, finishing off the leftovers for breakfast, and we headed up to the Gold Coast to Surfers Paradise by bus. We checked into our hostel, and on the afternoon we went for a walk along to a pier. It was about a 4 or 5 hour walk there and back, so afterwards we were a bit tired, but we picked up some shopping and made some pasta for dinner. The next day in Surfers Paradise, we'd booked in for a surfing lesson. We started off with the basics of being able to catch the waves lying down, and then we learned how to stand up, which was pretty easy when we were just on the sand. But we both did pretty well when we got out into the water, being able to catch some waves. It was a good place to learn how to surf because the waves were pretty long and good at the beach. On the afternoon, we just headed back to the beach and ended the day by making some chili. The next day, we travelled by bus to Brisbane.
We've just left our bags at the hostel in Brisbane, and we're just heading out on a walk now to check out Brisbane and walk to the Botanical Gardens.
So we walked to the Botanical Gardens, which were very nice, and we decided to just sit under a tree and have a nap for maybe 2 hours. Then after some food, we took a ferry ride across the river and went to the park on the other side. Inside the park there was an inland beach and swimming pool, which was cool. Then after an ice cream we walked back along the river and we stumbled across a public piano. Then on the evening we went to the casino and successfully lost all our money at blackjack. And there was a sports bar inside, so we watched Sunderland versus Newcastle, which was a bit of a boring game, but it was solid to get a win against Newcastle at home. The next day we waited in our hostel for our bus. It was quite sweaty and hot in the hostel, but eventually we got a bus along to Noosa Heads. And the next day we'd be going on to Kagari, which is Fraser Island, and it was very rainy on the morning, so it wasn't looking very good. But we managed to have some breakfast and get sorted. And James introduced everyone in our car to some classic British music, Arctic Monkeys, and we'd be driving around on Kagari in 4x4 vehicles, which were a little bit bumpy and uncomfortable in the back. And on the island, every meal time would be made by a different car group. And after some lunch, we headed to an inland lake. But it was a good place to chill out at and have a swim. Whenever we weren't on the campsite, we had to walk in groups to avoid getting any dingoes. So we walked back to the car and we each took turns driving along the beach at different points. So this was one of the times where James got to drive. And that night on the camp, it was our turn to make the dinner. So we made pasta bolognese. So there was 4 cars in our whole group, and in each car there was 8 people. So we served up dinner for everyone, and then on the evening we just had a campfire for some marshmallows and played some games. The next day we started off by heading out to this shipwreck of an old hospital ship, and we got a picture of our group. And sometimes we'd have to drive through water and you just had to take it slowly. And the next spot we went just along a lazy river. The next spot we stopped off at was the Champagne Pools. It was just some rocks with water in, and afterwards we went and picked up some plastic off the beach. So these were the 2-person tents that we were staying in, that did have a cover, which was good, and we played a bit of volleyball in the evening, as well as chilling out around the campfire. There was also some outdoor toilet and showers, and we were up early every morning usually, and we did get to see a few dingoes whilst we were driving along the beaches. Then we stopped off at Lake Mackenzie for a swim, and the sand here was very fine with a lot of silicon, and it's meant to be good for your skin.
We've just got back from the lake, but one of the cars has broken down. So we're just waiting for a mechanic maybe to come and sort it out, and then we'll get going.
So after a little rest and wait, the mechanic came and got the car sorted, and we were ready to head back off. And we got a picture of our group from the car in car 2. Then on the evening we just had dinner at the hostel. And after our big adventure we were pretty tired, so we chilled out most of the day and went out for dinner on the evening. The next day we had a really nice breakfast, and before our bus came we went on a short walk into the Noosa National Park and got a bit of food in us before we were getting a long bus.
We're about to leave Noosa and get a 16-hour bus to Arley Beach. So we'll be sleeping on the bus, maybe if it's comfortable enough. But it's going to be a long trip, 16 hours. So we'll see how we get on.
So we set off on the bus towards Noosa. On the way we stopped and got an Aussie meat pie, and we saw a big kangaroo and stretched our legs. Then after probably not very much sleep, we woke up, and when we got to Arley Beach we walked along the harbour to get to our hostel. Then quickly made some lunch, and we were pretty tired afterwards, so we spent most of the day just sleeping and resting, because the next day would be pretty busy.
And what are we doing here today, boys? What are we all dressed up for?
Skydiving.
Yeah, here we are, plummeting out of perfectly good aeroplanes. Well, I don't know if it's perfectly good, but it'll get us up there, eh? Anything you want to say to friends and family at home before we go? No?
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. All right, let's go chuck his out of an aeroplane. You? Yeah, mate. That was jump number 1. You gonna do it again?
We'll see.
Let this one sink in first, eh? Well, you did perfect, my bro. Thank you.
After the skydiving I felt quite sick and nauseous, so we decided to go sailing on a boat tour for a few days to help me with that. We were sailing around the Whitsundays, and the boat we were on had about 30 people on it, but it was kind of cramped in for the sleeping, and it got pretty hot on the boat, so me and James were sharing this spot, but it got a bit hot, so I had to go and sleep up on the deck. The next day we did some snorkeling, and then we went on to Whitsunday Island, and we walked through this really shallow water on the beach, got to see some baby stingrays, and then up to the top for a scenic view and a big group picture. On the evening we just chilled out and played some cards, and over the edge we had a big light which let us see different things. I think we saw some sharks and some dolphins. The next day we had a bit of a wait whilst the engine was broken, but we eventually got back onto land.
So we've just gotten off the boat, spent 2 days on it. It was pretty cool, saw some nice islands and went snorkeling. Really good, lots of fish, lots of coral. but it was a bit sweaty and hot in the boat.
So after the adventure on the boat, we were pretty tired and spent most of the day just chilling out and went out for some dinner on the evening. The next day was Christmas Day and we packed up our stuff, got a free sausage sandwich on the morning from the hostel and set off on a 6-hour bus ride to get to Magnetic Island. It wasn't a proper Christmas because I wasn't at home with the family, but at least I had James with me and we were keeping each other company. We got a ferry across to Magnetic Island, and when we got to our hostel, they told us that we could go out and feed some wallabies. They were pretty cute, but they did have some sharp claws if they were getting a bit hungry. Then the next day on Boxing Day, we didn't really do very much. This was the view from outside our room at our hostel, which was very nice. But it was too hot really to do anything, so we just chilled out and played some games. We were both trying to get the highest score on the basketball machine, and there were no shops nearby, so we were just eating in the hostel mostly. On our final day on Magnetic Island, before we left, we headed to a koala sanctuary to see quite a few different bits of wildlife. So we saw some koalas which were introduced to Magnetic Island because they do quite well there because there's no natural predators. And we saw a few different types of reptiles, and then we got to have a go at holding a snake. After the tour, I managed to balance a penny on top of the lemon in the jug, which won James a free pint. And just before we left our hostel, we decided to have one more go on the basketball machine. So we got on our final Greyhound bus towards Cairns. We stopped off in the middle and walked along a pier just to stretch our legs. And James also got a video of a cassowary that was passing us. For our first day in Cairns, we went out on a bus tour to the rainforest. This huge tree, sort of like the big tree from Avatar, was made by a smaller tree that grew on top of another one and then overgrew it. Then we had a tour guide tell us a bit more about the Aboriginal culture and how they would use different plants to form natural tools. Then he showed us how they would use a didgeridoo. And then after lunch we had to go on the rodeo, which seemed a lot faster in real life. Then we went out to a waterfall for a swim. I was pretty tired after this, so James had me catching flies. And then further down the river there was a big rock that was smooth and you could slide down. Then for our last full day in Cairns, we booked onto a scuba and snorkeling dive at the Great Barrier Reef. It was pretty choppy on the way out, so some people were having to go out the back of the boat to be sick. I was close to being sick, but thankfully we stopped just a few minutes before I probably would have been sick. But we got to do some snorkeling and then some scuba diving after some checks. I had to go with a beginner group. James got to go with advanced after passing his PADI course. And it was cool to go scuba diving, but I thought that I saw more on the snorkeling that we did on the Whitsunday Islands. And the next day we had an early start. I was getting a flight to Christchurch in New Zealand and James was flying to Sydney. So I got my flight fine and made my way to New Zealand.
So yeah, that was the Australia vlog. It was nice, it was quite warm whilst we were there and we did a lot of stuff. It was very busy. We had a nice bit of chill at the start at Sydney and then we just went to loads of different places. But yeah, quite hot and humid in some places. Maybe December was maybe a bit too warm, but yeah, and quite a bit of cool nature that we saw. Different scenery. Sydney was a really, really nice city. So I'm not surprised James went back there to stay for a bit longer. And yeah, K'gari, Fraser Island was cool to go on a little road trip round, and also the Whitsunday Island tour was really cool just to be sailing around on a boat, even if it wasn't that comfortable, but it was still nice. So yeah, overall Australia, very nice country, quite expensive and quite hot, but good fun. But yeah, hope you liked the vlog. Next one will be New Zealand, hopefully.